Got it. So just press the button here. And I think we are live. Oi, pessoal, tudo bem? Obrigado a todo mundo aqui por estar novamente nessa série super especial de palestras e Keynote Talks que nós estamos tendo aqui em celebração aos 20 anos do nosso curso de Laboratório de Métodos Ágeis do Instituto de Matemática e Estatística da Universidade de São Paulo. Hoje aqui nós temos o grande prazer de receber o Erich Gamma, que ele, né, é um engenheiro distinto aí na Microsoft, um dos membros da famosa Gang of Four, né, que foi responsável, né, por autorar aí o livro super famoso Design Patterns, né. Ele é um dos co-criadores do framework de JUnit, junto com o Kent Beck, todo mundo acho que conhece também, né, e, claro, também o Erich, ele é líder do time que atualmente desenvolve o VSCode, que é um editor de texto que ficou está bastante popular entre os desenvolvedores e vai ser o tema da palestra dele hoje. Muito importante lembrar, a gente, como já aconteceu em outras palestras, a gente criou um slide para que vocês possam submeter palestras para o Erich, para a gente passar para ele no final, né? Então o link está aí no chat para vocês acompanharem. E também, como eu já fiz em outras oportunidades, vou repetir tudo isso em inglês para o Erich poder acompanhar se a gente tiver mais algum convidado internacional entre nós. So, hello everyone, and thanks for your presence here today, and thanks very much for Erich for giving us a little bit of his time to be here. We are celebrating 20 years of our Agile Methods course in University of São Paulo in the Institute of Mathematics and Statistics, and to celebrate this, we are arranging a series of keynote talks that we are broadcasting for everyone, and we have the pleasure to receive Erich Gamma, who is a distinguished engineer at Microsoft, a member of the famous Gang of Four, who co-authored together the book Design Patterns, a very famous book for everyone who studied software engineering. He's co-creator with Kent Beck of the JUnit testing framework. I know many of you will know this framework. And of course, nowadays he leads the team developing VSCode, which surely is a very popular editor used by developers. So, Erich, thanks again, and please.
Yes, hello, and everybody. I'm glad to be here, and I heard it's about agile methods, so I thought I will share with you a little bit how we develop software, which is also agile, but of course you will see we're not the pure agile. So we are kind of, I would say, we have a shipping agile method, because for us, shipping matters the most, much more over process. So let me start to present. And of course, thanks for the nice introduction. I share my screen. Okay, sorry. Just need to set that. I'm get there. Sorry, I just need to get permission to share my screen. Okay, good. Share. So I'm sorry, I need to go to system preferences because I can't share my screen. Let me join from Chrome. Sorry.
Don't worry at all, because you know all VIPs that you have the same thing. You are not the first one, and not the last. It's amazing.
You know, of course, we use Microsoft Teams, right? Yeah. Allow. Okay. Okay. Allow. Okay.
Allow. That's a reasonable explanation why you don't have all the setup configured.
So here I am again. Okay, and now I will try to present my entire screen. Good. Another one. Great. And of course, at the same time, my cat is knocking at the door. So please let me share now. Co-autor might not have screen recording permission on your computer. Go to System Preference for more help. Okay.
Just to let you know, it happened with Ward Cunningham and with Grady Butch. It's the same.
Enquanto o Eric está aqui fora e vocês estão acompanhando a gente.
So
Eric is back. No problem, Eric.
So please let me share. You present your screen, huh?
Awesome.
Okay, so the topic is how we build Visual Studio Code in the open. I thought before just talking about the process, I also want to talk a little bit about the product because it's my big passion. And the way I think about the product is we work on this thing since 10 years. Many people don't know that. They think just this is an overnight success. But the way I think about it, it was an overnight success, but 10 years in the making. So quickly, what is Visual Studio Code? It's an editor, lightweight cross-platform. I hope many of you use it in your class and whenever you program because you want to support any language on any platform and you want to allow that you can edit anything from anywhere, right? So that's the goal, and I will tell a little bit what we mean by that. So where are we? What's the product we want to build, right? We worked, in my past, I worked on IDEs and Eclipse. It's also something I worked on. I love it a lot. It's an IDE, which is really deep, has some wizards in there, has some nice support for debugging, all kind of very much focused on one language. On the other end of the spectrum, kind of the more emerging thing that born in the web developers like is editors. Editors allow you to use the command line tool. To say the editor can be used for many languages, right? So what we tried to build with Visual Studio Code was something close to an editor, but we don't want to forget all the things we love from IDEs, like debugging, rich programming language support, like IntelliSense, code completion, refactoring. We don't want to miss that, but we want to be more like an editor and not have a lot of the ceremony that an IDE gives you. So that's the product we want to build. And the question is, what is the key thing of the product? And one of the key thing of the product is extensions. Because I mentioned before, we want to support any language and any platform. It's obvious we cannot build support for any language. We have to really depend on extensions of our tool. And for that reason, that's a key differentiator and the key architectural thing. We want to build this great extension support that we can get many extensions, but also at the same time not suffer too much from extensions. So why do I say that? When I'm a tool provider, right, and someone uses an extension that behaves badly, that can result in a bad experience for the user. Imagine when an extension runs amok and goes in an endless loop, which means the user cannot save the file. So that's unhappy, right, for the user. What is unhappy for the tool is the user has the impression the tool is bad. Similar when it comes to performance, right? So when you have an extension that performs bad on startup, the whole tool will be bad at startup. So what we wanted to build and what I'm really proud of is that we have an architecture that kind of isolates extensions. And you see that on the right? The VSCode core is separate from the extensions. They run in a separate process, like in a sandbox. And everything from the core is protected from the extension, right? When an extension runs amok, you can still save the file because the truth of your program is kept in the VSCode core, and we can always save that. So that was a very cool thing, which allowed many interesting scenarios, and that's something I'm very proud of. And one of the scenarios is remote. Because we saw when we can run extensions in a separate process, we can not only run them on a different process on the same machine, we can also run extensions in a different process on another machine. And this opens the door to many interesting scenarios, right? You can all of a sudden edit and run extensions on a different operating system than your local development tool, right? You can access remote file systems remotely, and you run all your tools on another operating system remotely. And that's a pretty cool solution. Of course, it didn't take us, we didn't build it overnight, right? There was a lot of work, a lot of sweating to get it all work. But basically, this is a powerful tool because this opens the door for several interesting scenarios, right? You edit locally, but your extensions run in a Docker container, which means all the tools you use Docker to set up your tool chain there. And you don't have to worry about and then pollute your local machine. Or you just connect an SSH box, which runs in the cloud, and you want to have a powerful machine or powerful compute over there. This all is enabled by this work. So the next interesting step on the next thing, which I think makes me proud and which I find very cool, is once we had this separation from UI to extensions, we can also make the same game from a browser. That is, we can run our tools in the browser and connect them remotely to extensions where the files and so reside, which basically allows us to run VS Code in a browser. What I should mention is that VS Code itself builds on Electron, which is an HTML framework that allows you to, and on top of Chromium, which is all web technology. So what we did here, we basically brought VS Code back so that it can run in the browser. And then what we did, we connected VS Code using a WebSocket and HTTP protocol to a remotely running server. Now, why is this cool? One application of this architecture is GitHub Codespaces, something that became available recently, I think in October. When you look at it, now we run this VS Code server and the extensions in a Docker container. In the Docker container, you also have the tools like Python and Git running in there. And you have your source code also checked out from the GitHub repository in the container. Now this container runs in a virtual machine, and GitHub Codespaces helps you to quickly provision this machine with the Docker container, with the VS Code, and all the runtime tools you need, the development tools you need, not only the runtime tools. And you have an instant development environment, and you can connect to it either from the VS Code desktop or from the browser. Okay, so that's pretty nice and something I'm pretty proud of. The most recent development is now that we also have VS Code Dev. And VS Code Dev, you can try it right now without having to install anything. You can run VS Code in the browser. Now, what we do here, previously you saw VS Code was connected to a virtual machine, which had the VS Code server in a Docker container. Now, what we do in this setup, we run everything in the browser, and we run the extensions in a web worker in the browser, right? We call this the web extension host. And in there, we can run extensions like TypeScript or Vim. Of course, the runtime is more limited than when you run on a full operating system because the browser gives you limited APIs. But we were still able to bring many of the languages in there, and it's still a rich editing experience that you can get. So that's pretty nice. And what we give you, either you can open a repository on GitHub or an Azure DevOps repository, or you can access the local file system using the new HTML5 file system API. So, to conclude my product talk, right, where we are today with the tool, now we have 20 million users, we have 30,000 extensions, we have an NPS score of 66, which is close to an iPhone, which is pretty nice. And now this makes the bridge to the next thing. We closed, since we make the VS Code available, over 100,000 issues, which brings me now more to the main topic, our development process. So before talking about the process, what's the most important in a process? Of course, it's the team, right? No matter what process, but the people build software. And I'm very proud of the team we have. We are distributed across 2 physical sites, one in Zurich, the other half in Redmond. So we're 9 hours apart. In total now we are 36. Today we have grown, or we started much smaller. We started with a team of 10. But I guess now that comes with the success. The more successful you are, the more people want something for you. That's why it was quite natural you had to grow and expand the team. Today we have 25 developers, 6 program managers, 2 doc writers, 1 designer, someone from marketing, and a UX research. That's all these UX studies and things like that. And this team works on VSCode, works on components that are used independently, like the Monaco editor. We collaborate with other things like Electron, Xterm, and we help to build many of these extensions. So that's the team. What also influences our process is, of course, that we open source, right? So since 2015, VSCode is open source, and I still remember when we announced it in New York, and I pressed the button that made VSCode open source, which was a great moment in my life. Okay, so now, how did we do, right? And I'm very proud that we were quite a successful open source project since we started. And GitHub always has this, they call it Octoverse, where they do measurements and offer all kind of metrics of different projects. And it turns out by now we are in the, this was from 2019, I think. We had around 20,000 contributors, which bring us to the most active or most contributed open source project. And also based on that, now we got quite some nice compliments that people say that we are really a high quality open source project and they like the way how we run it. So for this reason, I said, okay, why don't we then talk a little bit in this Agile Methods talk about how we run our VSCode project, how we plan it, how we build it, and how we make sure we have high quality. So when you now open VSCode, of course, you go to GitHub, you go to our homepage, and one of the most visible things that you get to is the issues page. And this already shows quite some important characteristics of the project, right? So first of all, you see we get quite some love. The green things is the love we get. We have lots of stars, many forks. But it's also a little bit the downside, right? And what you see is, since we are so popular, we have lots of issues. Issues are bugs and feature requests, right? It's not only bugs. And as I mentioned before, right, as part of making this project run well, we have to deal with lots of issues. And since in the last 5 years, we closed over 180,000 issues, which just impresses me a lot what the team has done. What you also see, what comes with the popularity is lots of discussions, right? So here I have sorted the issues by the most number of comments. And you see the whole team, the VSCode team, they have to involve a lot with the community, right? So these are the number of comments. And you see these are the popular feature requests which have lots of comments. So which means as we develop the product, VSCode, we also engage a lot with our community. And the way we do it, I will show you in a second, but you should not underestimate how much effort this is for our development team. Okay, let's look a little bit closer. What are some of our practices? The first one we call zero distance. So since we're an open source project, we want to be transparent to what we do. And the reason is simple. Now, when you do something in a transparent way, then people can observe what you're doing and they know what you're doing, which means they can also help you. For that reason, we publish a roadmap publicly, what we do in the next year. So that's the roadmap from this year. And usually at the end of the year, we make an update, which means we will soon start to work on that to come out with the roadmap for 2022. And then what we also do, each iteration plan is just an issue on GitHub where we publicly describe what we work on in the next iteration. So for us, an iteration is 1 month, right? So we are not as cool as the agile romantics where they have iterations of 1 week. For us, we are more, slower. We have 4-week iterations or monthly iterations. Which we tried to go shorter, but it just didn't work for us. And also keep in mind, we do that since 10 years. So we have quite lots of iterations, and you would go down to weekly iteration, you'd have even more iterations, right? Which would make it very hard for us to sustain this development speed. So transparency is the first thing, because transparency invites feedback, and transparency also helps with engagement. But that's not enough, right? In addition to just show what we are about to build, we have also to be responsive when requests or wishes come in, right? We're very active on Twitter. The team is active on Stack Overflow. Of course, we track Hacker News. We have a Twitter channel, and we have our internal Slack tool. To make it a little bit more clear how much effort this is, every month we get about 2,000 to 3,000 issues from our community, right? As you saw, we have 20 million users. Not everybody files issues, but with this popularity comes, of course, a lot of feedback. And the way we see it now, an issue is treated like a love letter, right? Because they care about your product. They want to tell you how you can improve it. So that's why we welcome for that in a way. But it's a lot of work, right? So 2,000, 3,000 issues have to be digested. And our goal is always every day. So an issue has to be seen by the team at most 1 day after it got reported. We have some tools that help us with that. I will show you. But we do this round robin, right? We have an inbox tracker who is responsible to see the incoming issues and do initial triage. And this helps us to stay on top of that, because once the initial triage, then each developer is responsible to manage the issues that are assigned to them. And you have to show and listen to feedback, right? When you don't listen to feedback, people will stop giving you feedback very easy. And what's interesting, some of the features you really didn't want to do actually happened based on really the lots of feedback from the community. And sometimes, yes, we have done features which is that we will never do that, like tabs and things like that. And yeah, you have to deliver on these upvoted features, because that keeps people engaged to give you more feedback and give you valuable input. So zero distance is critical to how we operate, and I would almost say that's one of the success factors of the project, why people think it's a well-run project, because it's really zero distance between the developer and the user, right? There is no tech support person in the middle. It's just direct conversation from user to developer. And that's a great thing. That also, of course, is not free. So in order to manage all that, we try to automate and build tools for almost everything that help us to deal with the feedback and make us more productive. Right. So, for instance, we have Git commit hooks that run all our hygiene checks. Do we comply with this, with the copyright notices? Do we comply with our code conventions and so on? We have lots of automated unit tests. We have smoke tests which automate from the end user perspective. We have unit tests which just test the individual components. And here on the right, you see just the GitHub normal pull steps. And one validation steps, which is interesting also for an open source contribution, that the contribution meets all the legal requirements, right? That they signed the license agreement when you make a pull request. Tools is very important to us, and we invest heavily in that, right? So we have internal tools for us to help us manage the project. So for instance, here I show you one tool we have, which is called Hot Issues. When you have so many issues, it's easy to forget what are the issues which really frustrates the users. So that's why we have built this tool, which allows us just by words, I'm really frustrated, please fix this, and so on. So these words, we use them, and based on these words, then we define a heat number for an issue, and then we can find out what are the hottest issues for the community and what we should really kind of react to, given that, as I said before, you want to be reactive to feedback. And that's one tool we have. We have many more tools in here. I don't go into more details right now, but this shows one of the tools. Another tool is, which is very important for us, is the releases and which release the community gets. Right? So the releases get pushed out and to the users, Sometimes you make a mistake, right? And we have control over that. And these are all the platforms you build. So you see this has grown quite a bit. These are the Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Alpine, and so on. And we can centrally manage which build should go out to our users, right? And we can just with a checkbox, we can say, yeah, this is the one we release, and this one we can take back or freeze, that users don't get that anymore. But the idea is really, we want to have lots of tools that help us to manage how we make builds available to users and how we interact with the community. Other tool, we have lots of bots, right? We have bots that help us with managing issues. So for instance, when an issue doesn't have any information, all we add is a label needs more info, and then the bot kicks in and adds this nice message, right? Thanks for creating the issue. We need some more issues with the right links and so on. These are all these little productivity things that help us to be more productive and digest the issues. This is a more interesting interaction, automation you see. Now, when a user from the community files an issue, we fix it, then we would like that the user from the community helps us to verify the issue. So and this is a flow we have, right? So a developer can add the label, please verify this issue by the author. Then what happens is the bot will go in a wait state and wait until a build is available with the fix. Once a build is released with the fix, then you see that the bot kicks in again and engages with the author of the issue and tells him, please verify this issue and use the insider's build for that. I will tell you what the insider build is in a second. Once the user is happy with the fix, they can just add a /verified and the issue will be closed and is verified, right? So here is see how the bot helps us with the whole workflow of bug verification and takes load from us that we have to do it and manually ping the author of the issue. This also gives you a feel of how much we invest in these automated bots. So now the next important pattern for us is we ship every month. And we do that since we made VS Code available, that's since 5 years. But also before that, and this was another 5 years before VS Code was available. So since 10 years, we ship every month. So it's very sustainable. And how do we do that? So we basically break a month into 4 segments. So week 1 for us is depth and planning. Week 2 and 3 is running. Week 4 is endgame. And then later on, we ship the release and we start the next cycles with depth and planning. Depth and planning is very important to us. So what people must understand, we have a code base which is pretty big, and you have to keep the code base in good shape. So what we do at the end of every iteration, we give the development team 1 week for depth reduction, which means self-guided, they pick the issues or work on architectural hacks that they want to improve for 1 week. So there is no pressure to do new feature. It's just the pressure is you help us to reduce depth in the product so that we really can stay agile and move fast. So that's a big investment, right, in depth reduction. It's not that we accumulate depth, we want to continuously do that. What happens in parallel is that we plan, right? During this week, the planning discussions take place. We talk with the developers what they think we do. We look at community input. We look at our roadmap, what we do. And based on that, we come up with this iteration plan that I show you that we capture in an issue. And then for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, some iterations of 5 weeks, then we work in a single stream. We have our daily stand-ups, of course, inspired by the agile culture. We do that too. We also do daily stand-ups. Of course, we don't stand in our stand-ups. Our stand-ups go 1 hour. So we're not as cool as the agile guys where they can do it in 2 minutes, because we like to do demos in the stand-ups, and also we do lots of discussion on UX and architecture. And I think that's part of the whole thing that makes the product so good, because everybody in the team is involved, and many developers from the team give feedback. So that's why I'm not upset that we're not as cool as the agile guys who do this short stand-up in standing. Then also something, of course, which agile guys say, oh, that's so bad, right? We have an end game, which means we spend 1 week to get the quality from good to golden, right? The agile romantics, they tell you, yeah, but you know, at the end, we have 1 week iterations, we're good at the end of every iteration. This is just a sign of depth that you need an end game. Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, we're not as cool as you agile romantic, so we need an end game. And in the end game, we have basically 3 activities. Everybody tests, everybody fixes, and everybody writes documentation. Right? This shows really we are generalized specialists, if you want, right? We're developers, we're planners, but we're also testers, fixers, and doc writers. And that's all happens in the end game. And the end game has also a checklist, what we do every day, how we get to the release notes, and also how we get the open source process satisfied, right? When you work in an open source project, you have to acknowledge all the open source components you use and so on, and you need to automate all of that. That sometimes people forget, right? When you're an open source project and you ship every month, you have to really have a lot of automation to satisfy the open source requirements. So once you have the end game behind us, the week, when we have done the testing and the fixing, then we work on the release notes. And then sometimes later, after some validation, we make the releases available. And often we have a recovery release in the first week. So the idea is just here, we want to reduce stress on the development team, right? When you have we want to, of course, ship the release that is golden, but some bugs just slip through. For that reason, we say we do a recovery build, which has 5 to a dozen issues in there in the first week, so that we can really ship quality, but we don't really get afraid to make a change in the last minute, right? So that's our ship monthly with quality pattern we use since 10 years. What we also do once in a year, we have these snow leopard iterations. I don't know if you're Mac user, you remember there was once this release called Snow Leopard, and the release plan of Snow Leopard was no new features, right? Only quality and performance. So we also make these Snow Leopard iterations or housekeeping iterations, where we for one month we really focus on bringing the bug count down, right? And we have almost a goal. Whenever we do it, we want to get below 5,000. And we start from 6,200. We got really down a lot. We take pull requests, we fix issues, and so on. And what you should not forget, right? When you burn down, as I told you, we get 2,000 new bugs every month. So it's kind of, we also, even so we get 2,000 new bugs, we get to burn down the number of open issues during these housekeeping iterations. So that's part of our process. The development team initially always says, I don't like this housekeeping. But once they get into it, they really like it because it helps them to make them feel good, because they can finally work on things which they have neglected. They can fix issues that were not that critical, or take pull requests, which weren't a priority, but we now still can satisfy community requests. So continuous feedback dogfooding, how we do that. So we want to get daily feedback on changes, and we also want to give our community a more stability version, a more stable version. And the way we do it, we have 2 channels where we make our VSCode product available. On the insider channel, we update nightly, and the stable channel, we update monthly at the end of the iteration. Right? And the goal is everybody in the development team, they're on insiders. And when there's a bug in the insiders, of course, our own development will be broken and slowed down. For that reason, we really care about the quality of insiders. And also for that reason, we can invite the community also to work on the insider versions. And we have about 50,000 of our users that are on the insider channel give us early feedback. We also have a small exploration channel, which is just really for experimental things we do with Electron, which has a much smaller number. But this is how we get also stability, by just aggressive dogfooding, an insider channel with daily updates, and a stable channel with with less frequent updates, but you can also use them side by side, right? Which always means if an inside is really broken, you can still use the stable version from the stable channel. So the endgame I mentioned, we do an endgame. The endgame is like a little plan. When we say we want to start with that, we have a checklist. Everybody in the team writes test plan items. So plan item is just an issue with a special label. A test plan item tells us on which platform you have to test. It has a complexity, has a summary in the testing. This is really used for exploratory testing of new features, right? We have unit tests for automated testing, but when you have a new feature, we want to also do some exploratory testing. And that's what we do with these test plan items. And this typically is 2 days of the week. We do this testing based on test plan items. We check them off when we have tested them on all platforms, and then we fix them for another day, and then we always increase the bar of which changes we allow to take. This is done by rotation, right? Everybody in the team is the endgame champ for one iteration, and the part of the culture is now the endgame champ nudges the team via Slack messages, hey, what is the status of test plan items, to really guide us through the process. And part of the current culture is, of course, the endgame champ also dictates what's the daily song during the endgame. And it's very interesting to see the multicultural sound preferences we have in our team. But what you see again, everybody's a tester and everybody's a writer, right? We do that in the endgame. We write the test plan items, we're the testers. There is no special testing team and so on. We're all developers. The test plan assignment is done also by a tool. Given that we give some complexity to the test plan item, we can then partition the test plan items across the team so that we get a fair load across the team. So that's the same thing. Also, we try to automate the tool things as much as possible. So that's the end game. What comes next? Oh, saying thank you. Right? Once you write the release notes, one important part of the release notes is the thank you section. And in the thank you section, we say thank you to all the contributors to our release. And contributions are either helps in issue tracking, people that help us to find duplicates and so on. We say thank you to them. And of course, we also say thank you to the people that submitted the pull request. Right? And again, this is all automated. Now we can just say generate the thank you list, and we find out which pull request got merged from outside of the team. And we also spent a lot of time on the release notes itself, because the release notes, they sell the product, and they are like a little soap opera, right? Every month you want to make users kind of happy with the release notes and the new episode of the soap opera. That's our idea, how we do it. So we share recurring duties. As I mentioned, we get lots of issues in, lots of feedback, and we do this in a round-robin fashion on a weekly basis. One is the inbox tracker. We have bots that help us with that. They get trained with machine learning, right? They can assign issues to a particular area, which then gets owned by a particular developer. So and the bot gets better and better. And now it's actually at such a good level that we almost start to rely solely on the bot to assign the issues without any manual inbox tracking. We have a build champion that makes sure that our daily builds are okay, not broken. And we have a monthly endgame champion, also with a round-robin assignment. And as you see, sometimes it even hits me, right? Everybody in the team shares the roles. Okay, so that's the recurring duties. So I can go on more practices, but the good thing is whatever we do, now you can watch, if you go to GitHub and our project and see the repository. So if I had to summarize some key practices we have, zero distance, of course, but important, we ship every month, right? This is a fixed rhythm. We plan a week, debt reduction, development, release notes every month. We do continuous debt reduction, one week per month. We do continuous listening on feedback, given that we manage a lot of issues. And what I didn't focus on in this talk is how we also maintain a performance focus, right? We have measurements of the startup performance, and we have a data warehouse that shows us on different platforms how performance evolves over time. But these are also very important key practices for us. So To conclude, what are some key things to create an overnight success? 10 years in the making. I think very important is you have to be patient, because with some of the technologies we built, we were too early, right? We had a web IDE 8 years ago, but we were just too early. The backend technology wasn't ready. You have to be persistent. Don't give up when you're too early. Very important, you have to be fit. And what I mean, the code has to be fit so that it can run fast. And you can make the code fit by really having no depth. And that's why we invest so much in depth reduction. And also you have to be willing to pivot, right? Because sometimes you work on something and think that's a cool product, but based on feedback, then you have to, like a startup, decide, well, we go in another direction, which we have done 5 years ago before we decided to go with the desktop version. And last but not least, right, you have to be lucky. That's just the important thing. If you want to be successful, you cannot do without it. That's all I have. As I said, whatever I talked about is visible. So you can check that whatever I do, you can go to GitHub, our repository, look at issues, look at plans, look at our wiki, and everything is open there. So with that, I would like to end and, of course, be open for questions. Hello?
Hi.
Oh, okay, now I got just shocked. Wait, nobody is here that talked. So you're still here?
Yes, you're still here.
Can you, you took over the screen?
Oh yeah, you can stop sharing your screen with us.
I stopped present. Okay. Oh
Yes.
God, this was a shock. You know, I talked for 40 minutes.
No, yes. That would be an issue.
That is, holy shit. Good. So I thought I talked a lot. So now I hope to get some questions.
Luckily, everything is all right. So thanks for the amazing talk. You talked a lot about continuous feedback. I found very interesting because there was someone who didn't submit a question, but a comment saying that just from the UX perspective, the person said she's an user and her experience has been great. So it's awesome just to give you a live feedback about the project. So we have some questions here, both about the project, the directions, and I think we have a couple minutes to pass through them. So our first question here is if there is any sort of input or pressure from the company, from Microsoft, on the directions of the project, or which issues to address, or if it's completely driven by the community. I think you showed us a little bit about the prioritization of the issues and all this stuff, but how much it has to do with the company policy, but also the community.
Of course, we don't forget who pays our salary, right? Very clear. But the way we try to interact with what we call partners, these are from the team from Microsoft, which are our partners, we also try to guide them file issues, right? So they also go to the same channel on GitHub. They file issues there. And of course, sometimes they can get some, hey, this issue is really important to us. But we try that they use the same channels as the external community are used from Microsoft, right? This also is good for transparency and also is more visible. But so yes, we work on extensions also that are specific to Microsoft technology, right? But we try to really keep the open source project separate and transparent and have maybe extensions which are Microsoft specific, right? So that we have the core thing community driven and really kind of in a way neutral, right?
Awesome. We had another question. If you could tell us more about the stand-ups. You said you have two teams which are located in, I believe, by the time zone in two different parts of the world. If you synchronize both teams, or if you do the stand-ups, those stand-ups simultaneously, how a little bit more detail about this process.
Good question. So we haven't solved the simultaneous stand-up problem, right? So we have a stand-up meeting at 10 a.m. in Zurich, and Redmond has the stand-up meeting at noon their time, right? So there's no overlap in the time zone. And we accept that these stand-ups are per team. However, we have other meetings which kind of bring then the whole team together. So first we have the planning meeting every Monday where we go through the progress on the iteration plan. Then we have meetings where we talk about the user interface, right? On Monday, we have the UX call, where we have UX discussions, right? What should we do with a particular feature, UX feature? And this involves people from both Redmond and Zurich. And the other common call we have is the API call, right? I told you extensions are very important to us. The key to have a nice extension story is to have good APIs. Given that API is so important to us, once a week we have an API call where, again, people from Redmond and Zurich participate and discuss issues together. So the stand-ups are per team, but then you have other meetings which are cross-team. That's how we have arranged it. The stand-up itself, yeah, we record them, so which mostly I watch them. Now when I'm gone and I cannot see, I just want to stay on top. Then I watch stand-up recordings. But we have started to try to do cross-team stand-up watching, but it's just too much overhead, right? You cannot 1 hour in our stand-up and another hour in the Redmond stand-up. This does not work. And also, the important thing with a stand-up is it's per site, and then we try to share common topics, common problems in our common meetings.
Great. And a follow-up question about that. Well, the fact that you had two teams, one in Zurich and one in Redmond, I think remote collaboration is natural because the physical distance forces you to do that. But we had the pandemic and everyone was forced at some point to go remote.
Yes.
And how was that transition for you to go the full team remotely?
So I must say, even before the pandemic, we had the rule kind of you can stay 1 day or 2 days per week at home, right? So you don't have to do travel to the office. So we had that before. So when we transitioned to the pandemic and home office, this was just, instead of just 1 day at home, we stayed a full week at home. And the stand-ups are still how we get together, right? That's why I think a 1 hour stand-up is a good thing, because that's every day, 1 hour, the whole team is together and interacts, right? And for us, it's pretty smooth, I think, so far. Now we're in the 18 months, I guess, of a home office. Of course, we have some barbecues where we still meet each other. But what we see is, and what people tell me now when we ask, so how does it go? They really miss the more informal conversation, right? So some innovation happens at the coffee machine, right? When you discuss things, and that's what people miss. And we try to do it virtual coffee events and so on. It's just not the same, right? Because sometimes, yeah, what I observe when we have a team room, right, which I haven't seen since 18 months, but we have a team room. What I see is just someone grabs someone, hey, come here, I have this problem, and they just program together on a solution, right? And this is what the team misses. That's for sure. This ad hoc gathering together to solve a problem, right? That's what we miss, and we have no good analog in the digital world with Teams meeting for that.
Yeah, for sure. Surely this is a problem, I think, for every team going remote.
Yeah.
We had another question about automation, that you said you automate a lot of things, including tests. And if you could talk a little bit more about the types of tests that you have automated.
Of course, you have unit tests, right, which are just testing behavior of a function or a class. Then we have integration tests. An integration test really starts up Visual Studio Code and programmatically exercises things. Like that's dot. And then the last one is kind of smoke tests, which are user tests, right? User interface tests. They test at the UI level. We use the tool Playwright, which allows you to script across different browsers. And you have tested and run across different browsers, Chrome, Firefox, what have you, Edge, and that's also automated. And that's the smoke test is the most fragile one, as to be expected, because the UI changes and the race conditions, whatever, or timing conditions, and so on. But we're getting better at that. we try to get as good as possible so that we can automate that, because this helps us a lot of time, right? The smoke testing is in the end game. You really want to have some safety net when you make last minute changes, that you haven't broken it fundamentally. But it's a classical testing pyramid, right? Unit test, integration tests, UI tests. That's what we do, and we have the most unit tests.
Yeah, and we had a question from Andre. He asked more about the other side, because automated testing plays a crucial role in your development process. But what about the exploratory? You said that you have a huge deal by the end.
Right, in the end game, we do exploratory testing, right? So you develop a new feature, then you describe the feature and what it does, and then you give roughly things that should be checked, right? So the features get exploratory tested, and if you see, if you go to our post, you see these test plan items, right? And they are really a little exploratory test. So that's what we do too, yeah. So in the end game, where we do manual testing, that's mostly exploratory, based on these test plan items, which are little exploratory test scenarios, if you want. They're very important, because what I found is our team is just great at testing, right? They really go deep and try to find things in the feature which is rough or doesn't work. So I have not only great developers, I have also great testers.
Awesome. And we had a question regarding that. Well, you practiced lots of types of tests, a lot of automation. And do you apply TDD on the development? Or developers do that on a daily basis?
So it depends, right? There are some development tests that just basically the specification is the test, right? So that's what we do. But it's both ways, right? We're not purists. As you have seen, we're not purists, right? We try to do what really works well for us. And we love unit tests. And sometimes we do them test first, and sometimes we do them test after. So it's just how the developer wants to do it, right? But we're not religious in any way.
And another question regarding more about the structure, because going more to the side of architecture, you have in VSCode plugin architecture, kernel architecture. Sometimes people name this architecture style, and it's not simple, because you have silos that are those plugins. They are decoupled from the core, but there is a relationship between both sides, and you have a team of 36 people around that. You started with a smaller team.
25 developers. We started with 10.
Yes, and then you had to grow that. We also have a course in our university about complex systems and how to handle this. Sometimes with distributed systems, not the case, but I think the scenario is similar in the sense that you have multiple teams that you need to integrate in a single project. So how is this relationship between those multiple teams?
Okay, so we have a plugin architecture and extension architecture, right? But what's interesting is extensions is kind of their own ideal world, right? So we have they program against the VS Code core, but the VS Code core exposes a very nice API to extensions, right? But in the core, we have a componentized system where you work with dependency injections, right? Where we inject services in the different components to keep the decoupling low. But this is not exposed to the extensions. That's only for us internally. And internally, you have a componentized architecture that uses service injection and layering, right? So we have well-defined layering, and that's documented also on our website. There's the different layers and the service injection we're using. So, and then we have, it's a componentized system. So, and then a component is assigned to a couple of people, right? There's the editor component, there is the terminal, there is a task, there is the TypeScript integration, and so on. This is assigned to a subset of the people that are the component owners. So that's how we manage it. And yeah, it's a complex big system, over 1 million lines of code, and it's 10 years old, and you can still make changes, right? And you can go.
We have a question here related to open source. How do you decide the? Sorry, I just. The question was here. Okay, what concerns did you face, and the preparations were necessary before going open source?
Okay, yeah, that was good. So this was an intense time. Within 6 months, we did two things. We prepared the code to be ready for open source, and we prepared the extension architecture. So open source, what we wanted to do is have a distro open source core split, right? So this was one effort we had to do, because we cannot open source like Microsoft protected graphics, logos, and so on. So we have to have this separation of a distro and open source core. That was the first thing we did, right? And you see that we have a kind of a product JSON that configures and allows us to configure the Microsoft specific things, like the extension marketplace is not open source, right? Or some graphics. That's all configured in this product JSON that separates the open source core from the Microsoft specific product elements. That was one thing we had to do. The other thing we had to do, we had to cleanse the code, right? We had to cleanse the code for bad words and so on. That's what we have to do, right? So we want to really make a good impression, and we had to cleanse our code, go through it, to use bad words in the comments. Of course, we could do it with a stop list and things, we find things, and that's what we had to do. Plus, then the third thing what we had to do is we make the build we do internally has to be repeatable by the open sourcing. Right, the whole build system, everything we had to engineer so that what we do, an open source developer can do as well. That was quite some investment. And the last thing, of course, what we had to do is to come with a guide for how to contribute to the product, right? So internal cleansing, build system, distro split. I think these are some of the things we did do in the 6 months, which were very intense for us.
Yeah, and I think we have one of our last questions here, which is regarding what are the financial interests of Microsoft in a project like this? Because it's an open project, all of the stuff being developed in the open, as you said. So, and do you believe that this focus on quality and debt management that you do would be feasible in a more business-like environment, assuming, of course, this is not the primary interest?
No, I think maybe you don't get as much feedback as we do from a community, but the whole process to invest in debt reduction, I think you can do in a internal project as well, right? Just be honest and say, if you want to have good quality, you have to invest in it continuously. I think this can be done. And also, no, I don't know. I thought your question was, why do we do that as Microsoft? But of course, why we do it at Microsoft is because we want to have a tool and want to be relevant to developers. If you're relevant to developers, they could consider other products from you, like the cloud, like Azure, and so on. So it makes a lot of sense to invest there to be relevant for developers, because, as you know, developers are important in the software business. Yeah. Developers. That's what Steve Ballmer said, remember?
Yes. Well,
maybe
Eric,
I'll have the last question here.
Sure.
Do you know, as I would say, quite old, for me, I remember very well the development of Eclipse. That was the tool.
Yeah.
And now Eclipse is almost dead. The students do not know it anymore. And what was the main different on architectures that you did, or you chose on VSCode?
I would say, I still love Eclipse, right? So it's a cool thing, good experience, right? No, but the big lesson we had, I would say for Eclipse, we were extension naive, right? In Eclipse, we loaded all extensions just happily in the same process as Eclipse was running. As you saw what I explained in VS Code, we run extension in a separate process to protect the core from the extensions. And that's just such a key difference. You have to think of it up front, because it's hard to do it after the fact. And this was one of the number architectural lessons from Eclipse, right? a multi-process architecture where you isolate things that you don't want to have side effects was very important. I think that's what we missed in Eclipse, right? In Eclipse, where single process, you load everything in one process. What we do with VS Code, we have a multi-process architecture with isolation and protection through process boundaries. And this is enables so much, right?
Great.
That's awesome.
Really great. Thank you very much.
Erich, thanks very much for your time and to answer all those questions and to present us more about this fantastic work. I think you can be sure that a lot of both our viewers and people in the university are using VS Code. So this is an important feedback, and we can see how the experience and all the time you had previous experiences with Eclipse, and also what you and all your team are bringing to this is showing the quality and how people are adopting this to make this difference. It's nice to see something produced from developers who had lots of experience using those tools throughout the history up to today. And now we are in this next iteration. So thanks very much for sharing all of this with us. And I'll thank our viewers for submitting all the questions and be here. In our YouTube channel, we have lots of other videos that we had the privilege of interviewing many other world specialists to celebrate our course. We had very recently a lecture with Greg Butch, which is available in our channel, and many other people. So I recommend everyone watching to take a look in our playlist. And I'll just repeat that in Portuguese for everyone, just to close our call today. Então, obrigado, galera, de novo por todo mundo ter participado. Foi um grande prazer ter o Erich aqui conosco para essa super palestra. Não esqueçam a oportunidade de olhar também várias outras keynotes que a gente teve para celebrar aqui parte dos 20 anos do nosso curso de laboratório de métodos ágeis, e também que a gente tem feito aí ao longo da pandemia. São palestras super legais, né? Deixa aquela curtida no canal, aquela seguida para ajudar a gente quando a gente tenta trazer conteúdos como esses. E muito obrigado por todo mundo que assistiu. É isso aí.
So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much again. It was really great. Thank you very much.